coverage in the town. Our day shift starts work at 6 o'clock in the morning, and they work a 10-hour day to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And you can read that the explanation of their typical day. They answer alarms, larcenies. They do a lot of administrative functions, and what we classify as administrative functions, for example, is picking up the town deposit from the treasurer's office, and they bring it to the bank. So that's a service provided to the town, and other duties as well, serving subpoenas, transporting prisoners to court, taking evidence to the state police drug lab. So those would be classified as admin duties. The afternoon shifts, there is somewhat of a kind of a change. People are now coming home from work. You have a tendency to, people are tired. Maybe they stop for a drink on the way home. So we see motor vehicle accidents in the afternoon and early evenings are more serious than the ones that we see during the daytime. There's more bodily injury. There's a greater chance of a fatal accident occurring in those evening hours, and hence our staffing levels are higher during this period of time. It's also the time when most domestic violence occurs, and we had 172 incidents of domestic abuse within our community last year, in 2006. And as you'll see in a little bit, when we assign man hours to that, it takes an inordinate amount of time, which is mandated by the Executive Office of Public Safety. Our overnight shifts, again, there's a philosophical and a strategical, tactical change in their patrol functions. They answer alarms, and they perform what we call community maintenance. They're watching for fires. They're on patrol at night, and we know that, once people button up their houses and the temperature starts to drop, a lot of these older homes in our community, in communities around us, can be subject to fires. So that's one of the tasks that they're charged with. They patrol the streets, looking for fires, and they'll report them into the smoke or whatever. They report them into 911. We notify the fire department, and we respond with the fire department to those issues. They look for suspicious persons, because at nighttime, during the daytime and at nighttime, you'll see what we classify as breaking and entering. That's typically when somebody's not in the property. But at nighttime, there's a change. Homes are broken into with people in the home. They call that a burglary. And much more dangerous situation, and the Commonwealth treats that vastly different. And they're monitoring the community for business breaks as well. We also average about, yes, Don? Sure. I'm sorry. The afternoon shift starts at 4 o'clock and it ends at 2 o'clock in the morning, and the overnight shift starts at 9 o'clock and ends at 7 o'clock in the morning. So there is an overlap between all of our shifts, which gives us manpower during those critical junctures.
The overnight is when?
From 9 o'clock at night to 7 in the morning. The day shift, uniforms, I'll break it down into uniform personnel first. We average about 4 officers per shift. There is one shift that has 5, because we perform a licensing function on that particular shift, and most people coming into licenses appear on that during the daytime. But on average, we have 4 uniform personnel per shift. So that would be 12 uniforms per day. That is broken down into 1 supervisor and 3 patrol officers. Now, Monday through Friday, we have 3 detectives that are working, and as soon as they develop the confidence and skills necessary to be left on their own, we will change the shift. So there will be a night detective overlapping the day detectives as well. So we'll get better coverage in that area. And then we have 2 lieutenants and myself that are working. Kevin and I are working Monday through Friday. Lieutenant Brennan, for those of you who haven't met Kevin yet, was recently appointed to a full-time lieutenant's position. And we work on Monday through Friday, and we have a second lieutenant that was just appointed last week, Dan Jones, and we'll be working his schedule out Monday, and he'll likely overlap somewhat on the weekends and in the afternoons for communication purposes and so on and so We average about 200 to 250 contacts per day. That's calls for service. That's people walking into the station. That's other agencies calling our station. So it's busy in that building. It's in our dispatch area, and that has nothing to do with the new facility. We're just seeing that level of increase over the last couple of years. And what's happening is because of that level of activity within the building, we've had to take another patrol officer off the street. Normally, we have 3 cruisers per shift on patrol in the community 24 hours a day. Between the hours of 7 o'clock in the morning and about 10 o'clock at night, we've had to, about 60% of the time, take 1 cruiser off of patrol and put them into dispatch to help handle that increased workload at dispatch. So how does that impact the community? Well, our calls, our response times have been slower. We have less people responding to the initial call for an emergency. But what we do, our policy requires that second officer will leave dispatch and back up those officers. But you can see that 5 or 10 minute delay that can occur in a crisis situation as we get that officer equipped into a cruise and responding to back up the 2 cars on the street. So that's been a change over the last 6 or 7 months. Yes. That's correct. Well, for example, our safety officer, if he goes out and he liaisons with any CPC or DPW working on a project, that would be categorized under that. Our DARE officers, when they go to the schools, we account for their time in the schools there. Lieutenant Brennan is a member of the community-based justice program, in which he meets with the North Reading School Department, the District Attorney's Office, Department of Social Services, to discuss students at risk. And he does that not only in North Reading, but he does it also with the vocational school in Wakefield. So it's activities like that. That's right. That's right. And that's a sampling of the activities. I couldn't in the time in the paper needed to be able to report out all the activities that we're involved in, but it gives you a snapshot of some of the things and services that we provide to the community. When you take a look at the staffing levels, what do we need to, and this goes right to the management study that was provided by benchmarking. There were 2 methods that I'm aware of. One method was touted by the local government and police management organization. It's a collaborative, again, of the International City Managers and the International Chiefs of Police Organization, where they developed a formula, and it's kind of I don't know if you can follow that on page 4 or slide number 1 there on the page, but what they look at is they suggest that you break down, you take out the most likely activities that your department is going to be involved in, and we've listed in here as alarms, arrests, crimes, domestics, a motor vehicle stop, motor vehicle accidents, medical calls, mutual aid, and calls for service. And you assign a man-hour multiplier to that. For example, if an alarm occurs at a house or a business, it typically takes 2 police officers, sometimes 3, if it's a large business complex, to respond to that. So the average man-hours would be about 1.5 hours. In reality, it could be more, because if it's an owner is responding, the officer stays on scene. If we find something amiss, the officer stays on scene. So a good average is about 1.5 man-hours per incident. You multiply that out, and we spend about 1,076 man-hours per year responding to alarms. And if you get down through each one of these categories, for example, you look at arrests. We had 340 arrests, and they average about 3 hours, man-hours per arrest, because that takes it takes the arresting officer, it takes the backup officer, and it takes the booking officer. It takes at least a minimum of 3 people. But in this day and age, it's under the present conditions of the way that new facility is designed, that would likely be bumped up to 5 or 6 man-hours, because the officer will have to stay in the building to conduct mandated by law 15-minute cell checks. So as you go through there, when you add all those categories up, we spend about 28,267 man-hours per year. You multiply that times 3 because it's a 24-hour-day operation, and you come up with 81,801 man-hours. Now you divide that by the number of hours that each officer is available in a given year. Now you look at that and you go, and you scratch your head. Because the average officer is available to work 1,562 hours per year, versus you folks and myself and Kevin that are working 2,080 hours a year. And that's driven by collective bargaining agreements. The level of time off provided to our staff is significantly higher than anybody. You know, I would throw that challenge out that the collective bargaining agreement for our membership is far more generous than any peer group that any organization could come up with, and that impacts your staffing levels.
Would you repeat those numbers for me, please? I know I got the 2080. I know that pretty well.
Yeah, it's 1,562 hours, and you arrive at that. You start off with 2,080 hours the average person works in a year, and you begin to subtract off vacation time, personal time, sick time, holiday comp days, comp time, mandatory training, birthdays. You subtract that off, and I use a 20-year veteran as the benchmark for this. It came up with those numbers, and so it just creates a staffing dilemma. And Kevin can attest to that, and anybody that's in the management of the department knows that we have a difficult time maintaining what we consider to be a safe and efficient and effective staffing level at the department. But anyways, when you calculate that out using that formula to cover all our shifts based upon the time off that's allotted to our personnel, we should have 52.4 officers working on that police department because of the time off available to our personnel. However, there is another simpler formula that most people use, and that's a formula that was developed by the International Chiefs of Police Association, and it's a simple multiplier of 2.6 officers per 1,000 residents. So if we look at 14,500 residents times 2.6 personnel, it comes out to 37.2. And we've been consistently on target with our personnel for a number of years, but we're beginning to fall somewhat behind based upon that simplistic formula, which doesn't account for staffing issues created by time off. And if you look at the potential population growth explosion in this community because of the Route 62 project, using that formula, we will likely should have about 49.5 officers. Continuing on, if you turn to page 5, part of that mandate was to do a risk analysis and a probability assessment. And we looked at the demographics and characteristics of North Reading. And North Reading has 22 liquor serving and or retail establishments in the community. And what are the likely crimes you'll see associated with that? Well, driving under the influence, minors in possession of alcohol, fights, disturbances, motor vehicle accidents, and the probability of that happening is high. Going on, we have 6 apartment, condo, trailer park complexes and 5 multi-unit buildings and an unknown number of multi-family houses in the community. That's, in the police parlance, it's called high-density living, and high-density living creates kinds of problems